So our panel today, we have three guests. We have on the end Dr. Jalandra Davis Brown. Let's give her a round of applause. And I'm going to say a little bit, and then Jalandra, you can introduce yourself. And in the middle, we have Moni in the middle, as he says. We have Hannibal Taboo. Let's give him a hand. And to my direct left, we have Impu Kamut. Everybody give Impu a hand. Jalandra is our panel expert on, she's researching Black feminist issues. She's also our expert on women, gender, and sexuality, and she holds a PhD in ethnic studies from University of California, Riverside, and she has a master's from USC. It's for USC people up here, Trojans up here, so I'm a little biased. Hannibal is a novelist, poet, comic critic, author, web designer, graphic artist, lots of things. He's going to tell you a little bit more. My favorite thing, though, two things. He is the best karaoke DJ around, hands down. And he's also a fellow creative writing major at SC. And that was a tough program, and he has been writing creatively since then, so I'm really, really proud of him. Impu is a Sebo or teacher, and he is the founding member of the Association of Independent Kemetic Egyptian Priests. And he is going to be our resident expert on African spirituality and how that's reflected in the film. We, all three of us, feel like that's a really important concept and something that we have seen on the internet that really hasn't been discussed a lot. So we're looking forward to hearing from Impu on that. So let's give everybody a round of applause. And welcome and thank you for being here. Jalandra, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what you're currently working on? Hello.
Hi, well, my name is Jalandra A. Davis. Just finished my doctorate, and I'm teaching at Cal State LA.
Congratulations.
All right.
Yes. My dissertation is actually on Black women's science fiction. So I read authors like, right?
Yes.
So I read authors like Octavia Butler, of course, Tananarive Due, Nalo Hopkinson,
Yes.
Nicole Sconiers, who is a local Los Angeles writer. So I read their work in the context of Afrofuturism, but also in the context of Black politics and Black political discourse. I'm actually very interested in the way in which Black women's science fiction engages the past and engages narratives and discourses around Black femininity. The way that I came into studying Black women's science fiction was actually just through Black women's fiction more broadly. I noticed that a lot of writers, Toni Morrison, Toni Cade Bambara, their work has these elements that might be considered speculative or fantastic or magical, even within what would normally be treated as realistic fiction or even historical fiction. So the way that I sort of understand Afrofuturism is not as a genre, right? Not as something that is sort of, it's Black science fiction. It's more than that and beyond that. I see Afrofuturism as a critical aesthetic and practice that runs through many different aspects of Black culture. That is not really, because some of the ways I've been seeing it defined as people talk about this film is, it's a mixture of Black culture and science fiction. And I'm like, well, that suggests that somehow science is outside of Black culture, right? But it's actually very deeply embedded within our spirituality and the way that Black people see the world, not really having to see material evidence of a lot of things to understand that they exist. And imagining it otherwise has been an essential part of Black social movements and activism. We have to imagine it otherwise in order to survive as a Black person in this world. So that is the way that I understand Afrofuturism and that I engage it in my work.
We can go home now. Let's give it Thank you, Jalandra. Hannibal.
I am a comic book writer. I've written a column called The Bipalette, the comic book resources, which is one of the top websites in the industry since 2006. I won the Top Cow Talent Hunt, which is from Image Comic. That was in 2012.
Yes.
Got paid to learn what I was doing there. And I've been writing comics professionally since 2013. I've been doing comics criticism since 2000. I've been doing journalism since 92 at the Sentinel. I started as an intern at the Los Angeles Sentinel. And I've worked for Vibe, Rap Pages, MTV Online, The Source. stuff like that. And I've also put out novels. I've been 2 volumes of Voices from Leroy Park, the poetry anthology. So I'm just all around creative, kind of Swiss Army brother or Wakandan Army brother. And what I approach this film looking at is both iconography that we can put forth into the future, moving forward, for kids to see a world where, oh no, that's me with the spaceship. Oh no, I'm a Baku, you know, in a way that those sorts of terms would have been unusual. When I was called an African booty scratcher when I was in school, that sort of thing is not going to be happening no more. That imagery is going to be washed away, thanks to our brothers Ryan and Chadwick and for our other sisters Lupita and so on and so forth. So, thank you. We're working on washing that self-hate away, and you will see very shortly a lot of it flowing down the waterfalls, never to be seen again. That's not a spoiler. That's not a spoiler. There's a waterfall in the commercial. Don't blame me for that.
You're on the line, but you good.
I walk right up to the line. But, so yeah, I look at it that way, as well as looking at the work that I do. I look at looking forward, not back. I'm not into a lot of period pieces. And positing a better world. One of my elders, V. Khalid, told me, you should stop writing what you have seen and write what you want to see. And this is what I want to see. This is what I want your kids to see, and this is what I want my kids to see, so we can all find a way there together.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannibal.
Peace and greetings. So my name is Mpu Kamut, as well, since we've covered the basics. I am the founder of the Kemetic Ahas and Sama Association, which means the ability to defend yourself and make war and keep your body flexible. So a great deal of what I teach is understanding the symbols of our ancestors, understanding the ways in which healing your body through movement, through food, and through sound provides you an opportunity to be whole and to be fully present today. The other tools that we offer is that, for example, things that we're working on, we're currently fundraising. We're going to be taking our association, and anyone in this room who's interested, we're going to Ghana in March of 2019 as part of the Independence Day celebration in Ghana, and also we're going to be teaching Tai Chi yoga, healthy foods. So that's one thing we're doing. And leading into that, as the spring equinox is coming and the summer solstice is coming, we also teach people how to eat appropriately for the seasons. So with that, we have a farmer's market that's here every week, and along with partnership with the farmer's market and Sola Foods Co-op, what we're going to be doing is, that's what we do already. So if y'all haven't heard about them, get connected with them. I'm a member, okay? My family, we're a lifetime family member. Well, what we want to be able to do, this film is a way to affirm us 360 degrees. And so the tools that I teach allow us to heal from past trauma, current trauma, which are psychosocial healing, spiritual healing, which comes from doing martial movement, Tai Chi Chuan, yoga, meditation techniques. So these are things that I've been doing roughly since 1989. And so we've done community organizing, we've done work in the community, and we're expanding it. And it's also a way of moving through the arts. So with that, I want to share with you, some of you may not have seen this. This is a book that they put out that contains all the background research and the artwork that they have out about the film, so that you can understand that. No, need you to see that. Can you hold the book out for me? Yeah. So you can see there's not a wasted inch in the book, okay? So they actually went to and did physical research, field research in the land of our ancestors. So what I said outside when we had Shine Mawasi present is validated by their work. So what you will see tonight will be moving. It will remind you of what we were to bring us into where we are and where we're going to go. So don't be shocked or surprised. We've already done this before. Although it's fiction, it's based off of things that we've already built in Ethiopia, in Sudan, in Africa, in something in Northeast Africa with Kemet or Egypt. Also the great Zimbabwe. We go down into the stone mounds of South Africa, in Lesotho. You come on to the west in Benin. There is not a place that we have not already done what you're going to see. And so first off, we want to get that straight. And then one of the things that I basically teach is our ability to access that information, to be able to bring forward what we've already learned. So also be able to remind us that when we build something, we need to be able to protect it and keep it safe. And so there are those of us in the community that you will see that we may not necessarily look like we're there to keep everybody safe, but you are in a safe place and you are surrounded by people that will ensure that you are safe here in our village.
Myself, I'm Angelina Arrington. I am the founder of Academic Savvy. And our goal with our filmings and all the other shenanigans I put together is to speak with our dollars, to gather together as a community and, as Impu said, in a safe place and in an environment that's culturally relevant for us, that's comfortable for us, where we can be ourselves, where we can show up with face paint and cakes and head wraps and it not be an issue. I'm a costume maven. I dress up every Halloween. I typically have 2 to 4 changes that day, no lie. And I am so happy to have the opportunity to cosplay for this particular movie. I think it's important that we do it. There has been some hate going around about that, but we remain unbothered about that. I showed up with my cape, so that's my thought on you being bothered that I show up with my cape. We will continue to do screenings. We will be supporting our sister Ava DuVernay on March 10th. We will do family night, so please keep your eyes open for the announcements about that. And just a little bit about our relationship. We've known each other since 1991. And we've been on this grind since 1991, probably before that, but together in our own way, we have been working in our own community this entire time. So we're not new to this. And when I found out that Black Panther was coming out back in September, I called the movie theater. So I wasn't on the bandwagon. I've been planning since September, and then called our partners, Niecy Hanks. Where's Queen Ramonda? Queen Ramonda, would you rate and we decided we were going to collaborate and coordinate, and then we topped it off with our wonderful panelists, Jalandra and Hannibal, and we figured we want to raise the consciousness and raise the vibration of our community through this event. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for your patronage, and we'll get started. Okay.
Time.
2:10.
Okay, we got 9 minutes.
Okay, well, let me know when it's 2:20. Okay, Hannibal, let's start with you. You were on a podcast about a week and a half ago, and you talked about the impact Black Panther had on you as a young Black male. And can you talk a little bit about that? What kind of impact it was to see a Black man as a superhero? And a little bit about the fact, also add to that, the fact that this superhero comes from a fictional African country, but an African country nevertheless that has never been colonized, because that piece is really important.
Okay, I'm happy to. Going back, one of the earliest superhero films was 1979's Superman with Richard Donner, where the tagline, the advertisement they put out was, "You will believe a man could fly." But the only Black person in that film was a pimp who said, "Man, those are crazy threads you wearing, man." So, sorry, I didn't write it. So, at the time, if I was going to believe a man could fly, I believe I would be watching him like this. And that doesn't exist anymore. That we're slowly eroding and chopping away at those images. So, when I saw somebody post online a picture of 2 young boys in a movie theater next to a Black Panther poster saying, "No, I'm this one. No, I'm this one," and they can see themselves in something. They can walk into the Toys R Us across the way and pick up an action figure that looks like them, and it doesn't just stand in the back of the Avengers pictures and order some ribs at Avengers Mansion. No, but actually has a part on par with and at the same level as all the other heroes that are lauded. That's important. They're growing up in a world, our kids are going to grow up in a world where they're like, this is just normal. There weren't Black presidents for a while? Was that a thing, really? There weren't Black superheroes? So if we could get this far with the limits that were placed on us intellectually and ideologically, how far they can go is literally limitless. And to be able to see that, to be able to see this cast and this director, to be able to do all of this on massive Disney's money is enormously funny to me. So, because Disney like, I guess, I mean, all right, whatever. I'm gonna get paid, right? All right, go do whatever you got. So there's that side of it, as well as with Wakanda. The importance of it is that as a nation that's never been colonized, a lot of the ideas that we have don't exist. And this is not a spoiler. There's no N-word in this movie. At no point are you going to hear it. No one says it. No one thinks it. Wakanda lives in a world where the N-word doesn't exist for them. Think about what your life would be like if you'd never heard that word. Think about what your children's lives would be like if they could go to Ralph's without hearing it play out of every freaking car. That world is Wakanda. And we can make it. We can make it, and we will. So to see that from a non-colonized place, a place that doesn't have our ideas about language, our ideas about conceptions, our ideas about possibility, all of which are taught to us through education, through language, through the words we speak, and the exposure to things that we have. They've been exposed to people flying at such a young age that the sky is a second home for them. We can't do that yet, but we can do it in the future, working together and moving forward. So those are some of the things I think are really important about this film. And again, I'm not spoiling anything yet because you see all that stuff in the trailer. You have no idea how hard it is to not do. I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna say that part, but I'm thinking it real loud. So I'm gonna stop talking now before I screw up.
Okay. And then let's take that thread of the location of Queen. Hold on, a Queen just walked in. I need to give this outfit a moment. Can we give her a round of applause? Yes.
Right.
The royal entrance.
Yes. We needed to pause for that. All right. I'm gonna have to borrow that for Halloween. For every day. Y'all gonna see me on that in the grocery store. I'm gonna be on Ralph's on Crenshaw in my crown.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all think I'm playing, don't you?
She is not playing.
Serious. People who know me know I'm really serious. So let's take that thread of African people living in a place that has never been colonized, because that means a lot, and I want to explore from a spiritual perspective, and then so Impu's going to go first, and then from a perspective of what women's roles are and what the possibilities for women are in this particular realm where this particular place was not colonized. It's really important for us to explore that.
Okay, so I'll spoiler free. Okay, this is gonna be so. What you see is a time where there's a time of transition. And you see a young man who's going from being prince to being king. And for most of us that are living, we haven't really seen that in this country since Rastafari became Haile Selassie. Mm-hmm. In terms of the impact, like a widespread, everybody's on the news everywhere. So, like, I guess there's some couple in Europe that's getting married later in May, right? And so you may have heard of them.
I'm not DJing it, so I don't know.
No, but so nobody in here, nobody. Okay, perfect. That's how it should be then. Okay, so what I mean is that in terms of the spiritual aspects of what we're talking about, what you want to understand is that we have a deep, deep relationship with the plant life on this planet. And among the first peoples to have ever understood how plants work and to give you access to other ways of seeing and knowing, we were among the first to do that. However, in terms of film, rarely have you ever seen that happen in a way that wasn't demonized, that wasn't made to be seen as if it was something other than the fact that our peoples are the fountain that springs forth Islam, that springs forth Catholicism or Christianity, that springs forth Judaism, that springs forth Taoism and aspects of Buddhism. The root of that is in Africa, coming right out of Ethiopia, coming right out of the Sudan and the mountains of the moon. And so in all of the films where you see in the trailers, you see folks, different colors on the face. It's designed to replicate what they see in the sky. And so when you see the faces, and you see the different people, you understand that it's not something that, like when we go outside at night here, do you see the sky, or is it helicopters? You know, planes coming in, right, down Century, right? So we have an opportunity to really see the sky and to really see and feel what it's like to interact in an environment where we've built some things and it doesn't negatively impact the environment. Where we do zero waste, that started in Africa. Sustainability, we started that.
Or in your grandma's kitchen in the South where
There it is, right, yes.
and it was not butter in there.
That's right.
Okay,
Exactly.
I had to point that
No.
out.
Yeah, 'cause
Yes.
and then you bring it all the way to us here. So I need y'all to understand, more importantly, that what you see there is that Africa has never left us. It is in every tradition, every so-called, so you don't sweep your broom over somebody's foot. I'm just going to say, okay, some of us understand what I'm saying. Again, our traditions have never left. We just didn't understand what they were for as we held on to them. And so, I'm not going to spoil it, but, again, y'all supposed to go see this movie before you came to church. We talked about this. Let's go see it more than once, so when we come together, y'all making this hard. All right. So, I got that part out. I feel better.
That's enough of you. I want to emphasize the piece about what we call superstition
There we go.
in the African American community. And I was raised in a Pan-Africanist Christian home. So we were raised in the church, but we had conversations about, my mother's favorite phrase is, what do you know out the desert came out the desert white? This was in reference to the school that I went to portraying Jesus as a white man. And we had a lot of conversation about what it means to have hair of lamb's wool, what it means to have skin that looks like grass. So I was raised with a very intelligent, very spiritually grounded family. And we are also very tied to our ancestors. My dad is currently redoing the cemetery. We have a family cemetery. And he's currently the keeper of the cemetery. And one of the things that I'd like to highlight in that is that Christianity has demonized our cultural practices as they relate to our spirituality. And we just have to be careful with that. I'm not hating on people who practice Christianity or Islam or what have you. It's your path, that's not my business. As long as you're keeping everybody safe, that's your path. What I want us to leave here with today is an understanding that we have been practicing African spirituality for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. A little bit about superstition is sweeping your feet under the broom. In Ifa, the goddess mother Oya is the guardian of the gate at the cemetery, and her symbol is the broom. And one of the origins of that particular superstition, you do not sweep your feet because that brings you closer to death, if you will. And some of that information was lost in translation, but that superstition actually has root in West Africa. You all see what we're saying with the spiritual piece? So it's important as you watch the film that you will see how the culture and spirituality are tied in together and how we've lost some of that as our countries were Christianized and Muslimized. And we're just encouraging you to reconnect with that because there is power in that. Jalandra, would you talk to us a little bit about the feminine energy that we'll see in the film?
No spoiler.
I'm trying to think what I want to talk about first. So I teach a course on Black feminism and womanism. There's actually an article we were reading recently where we were talking about the way in which a sort of rigid, state-supervised form of heteropatriarchy, so the domination of men, right, was part of the colonial project. It was an essential part of the colonial project, absolutely essential. Now, I don't say this to claim that there weren't forms of patriarchy that pre-existed in many African cultures in pre-colonial Africa, but you had political systems that were diffuse and that were flexible, and where women had bodies of, there were Queen Mother societies, there was, in Igbo culture, there was the Makiri Women's Councils. So they had these bodies in which they could powerfully influence the direction of their societies, and you also have cases where women were queens and led the military and did all of that as well. So I think one of the potentials of what we see in a place, in a sort of envisioning like Wakanda is a world where that didn't happen, right? So what are the possibilities for women within that world? One of the things that I talk about in my work is a concept that I call Afrotopia, which is kind of a long tradition. Like, this isn't a new thing. There's a long tradition in Afrofuturism of Black people imagining an otherwise African nation, like an African nation that never went through colonialism. One of the earliest novels was Pauline Hopkins' Of One Blood, which is a great novel to check out, and this is 1903, right? So nothing is new about this. But one of the things you often see in this kind of imagining are really sort of constrained images of women, where they're sort of placed on, pedestal, and the queen is sort of subordinate and she's sort of silent. And so one of the things I was really excited about in the film is this breaking of that kind of idealization of Black womanhood, and you have the emergence of, different kinds of figures, different women, right, who all have different kinds of goals and abilities and strengths that they bring to that they bring to this nation, they bring to this otherwise world. And so that was something that I was really excited to see, because I think sometimes in imagining otherwise, sometimes I think we create new kinds of sort of boundaries and constraints, right? So I was excited to see the different ways in which, women were able to express themselves and be agents in this world.
You talked a little bit, you and I talked a little bit about the portrayal of women in science fiction in general, and how you felt like this was a really different approach. You even talked a little bit about the costuming in terms of how it's typically portrayed in science fiction and what you saw in this movie. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I do find it interesting that when you see a science fiction superhero woman, she's very well endowed and half naked, in heels.
In heels.
I can't fight nobody in heels, not on purpose. I have to be fighting for my life if I'm fighting somebody in heels. Otherwise, I think I just want to be in some flat shoes, which I have on today. Because being a superhero is hard work, and you have to be on your feet all the time. So I found it fascinating that you noticed that, and that that's part of your research. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, definitely. Well, a lot of many of the sort of female figures that we see in the comics, many of them came about around kind of the golden age of science fiction or shortly after it. And the golden age was a time period in which the imagined audience for much of science fiction, even if it wasn't the people actually reading it, but the imagined audience was adolescent white boys, right? And the way in which the women are designed and the way in which they are portrayed often reflects that, right? So you have this objectification and, hypersexualization of women. And there's a way in which, when you think about Black science fiction portrayal of women, that sort of collides to Black women's histories of being treated very violently and exploitatively in visual culture. So I came across an interview with Ruth Carter, I believe. It's a costume designer's name. And she was really intentional, actually, about the costuming. Because if you actually look, I have a few Black Panther books, and if you actually look at the Dora Milaje and the way that they're clothed in the comics, it's very different than what we saw in the film. And she made that choice intentionally, right? She said, I wanted to create a hero for, little girls who, don't want to, don't want to be too revealed, right? They don't want to be too exposed. And I don't say this because I'm kind of part of a debate in the conversation, which in Black feminist theory right now, we're talking a lot about sexuality and Black women's bodies in visual space, and there's lots of different positions. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with taking off your clothes. I see no problem with it. However, right, for this first, such major film, right, in this major way of Black women being envisioned in this kind of epic space, I do appreciate that Carter made those very intentional decisions where they're still very beautiful, but they're not sort of over-determined by their desirability, right? You're just seeing, there's other possibilities and other ways to be. That is still, right, that's still very beautiful, right? So that was something that, that I, appreciated.
it made me feel very balanced, where I can be powerful one minute and then it's okay to be soft the next minute, and then it's okay to be another way the next minute. And I felt like it was very well-rounded. And you know, I'm far from being a little girl. It was nice to see other women on the screen, because it also then talked to me about possibilities of who I might still become, because I'm still in the process of becoming. Hannibal, can you tell us a little bit about, we're going to go to Hannibal and then come back to input. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the comics? Sometimes there is a misconception that Black Panther the movie and Black Panther the party are the same, and who wrote it, and did you ever think we would get here on screen with the big budget film coming from that particular comic?
Okay, what happened was, if memory serves, it was 66, that two Jewish writers, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, decided that they were going to come up with a black superhero. And they weren't as well researched in terms of what was happening in a lot of the countries with the movement, so on and so forth. So they didn't want to be trapped by the idea of what was. They instead said, why don't we just pick like Ethiopia? They were never colonized. We'll just, so that way we don't have to think about all those things. We can just make it something all new. And they experimented with some other names. For a while, he was going to be the Cold Tiger. For a while, he had this ridiculous kind of striped uniform that had yellow tights.
It was corny.
It was sick. But after a while, they worked through some things. In the same way that, you know, Stan Lee, at first he was like, should it be Bugman? I don't know. No, that's not right. Maybe Flyman. No, that Spider-Man. That's the way I'll go. So they workshopped it themselves and eventually came to the idea of doing the Black Panther. And in his introduction, he invites the Fantastic Four, who were the biggest heroes in the world at the time, to his country and then kicks them in the face and literally beats them up the entire time. Just to test them, just to see what they got, you know? And they're like, we can't believe that everything's so fancy in Africa. He's like, I can't believe that you couldn't believe it. So the irony there was that around the same time, Stokely Carmichael and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee were coming up with this iconography of using a Black Panther. And then Bobby Seale and Huey Newton were latching onto that iconography for what would ultimately become the Black Panther Party, which launched several months after the Black Panther comic book. They didn't read it, they didn't see it, they didn't have any idea it existed. These were just two ideas that popped into the cultural zeitgeist at the same time. So there is no direct connection in the same way that Magneto is not Malcolm X and Professor X is not Martin Luther King, so please stop telling that lie on the internet. But so historically this came along, but for many years, because the writers were more interested in, you know, the Nordic god Thor, the rich guy Iron Man, there was a line from one of the Black Panther comic books that said, what do you know about the Black Panther? It's like, oh, you know, he stands in the back of the pictures and, you know, he orders ribs at the Avengers Man. I don't know. I mean, he's the black guy. I don't know. And a writer named Christopher Priest took on the book. Christopher Priest is the first black editor in comics. He was one of the first black writers in comics. And he's still working today. He lives in Colorado. He's an amazing brother. And a minister, ironically. Yeah. And he, because his current book is about an assassin, that's why I think it's ironic. But anyway, and he decided to take the core elements of the Black Panther that come through Stan and Jack, that came through a writer named Don McGregor, who did a book called Jungle Action in the 70s, and say, how does this make sense? How can I make this logical and make sense? I'm trying to keep an eye on the watch because she told me it's 2:17. Anyway, and he invented the Dora Milaje. He invented the Kimoyo beads. He invented the vibranium suit. He invented so many of the inventions that now make people look at Black Panther like, whoa. When before he had the powers of Captain America, but not the shield and definitely not the public relations. So, did I believe this could happen? I was surprised when Obama got elected, honestly. I was like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't, you know, but am I happy to see it? Absolutely. I'm very happy to see it.
Awesome, and you said you had something to add to that.
Just briefly in terms of Black Panther Party lore, without getting all touchy, for those of you that are really interested, there was a group called the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party out of Lowndes County, Alabama. Their symbol was the Black Panther, and that goes back to 1965, 1964. So that the Black Panther Party had an emissary when they were doing voting with SNCC, who went down there and actually requested permission to use the Black Panther and then bring it back. So that's we need to get that so that we're clear, so that folks saying that it was one or the other, that they were already working on it independently and separately. But I wanted also for us that are here to understand that we have a real history of doing this work, and while it is slightly fictional, there are real elements of real truth that we have infused from the very beginning from our living culture that they borrowed.
Thank you, and this is our last question because we're out of time. And Pooh, I want you to talk a little bit about the importance of ancestors in African spirituality. Okay, so listen. I know we can't give a whole seminar on it because it's a full subject, and there are some things that you want to circumvent about the movie, but I feel like it's important for us to at least talk about that and to speak that out in honor of our ancestors who have helped us all be in these seats today and be in this position. So can you give us a little information about that?
In 1 minute.
Okay, so here we go. Quickly, in order to see far, you have to recognize that you stand on the shoulders of giants. And that for many of us, we have to really understand that in order for us to do many of the jobs and functions that we do, came with the sacrifices and the challenges of those that came before us. Many of us at home, to give an example, that because of the traditions we talked about earlier, you may not actively practice an African spiritual system. I would infer that you might, you just don't see it. How many of us at home have a drawer or a table where we have all of our elders that have passed on the table, just in your house somewhere, all the people, not with living people, or just the people who passed on. Okay, again, honoring those that have gone before us. Okay, so we have a long tradition of even remembering. How many of us, now I know, give you an example. My family hails from Louisiana, and my wife's family is also from Louisiana. So when we connected, we joked, but then it was like, well, what part of Louisiana is you from? You know, so where New Orleans? Oh, well, what part of New Orleans?
Which ward?
You know, so because part of my family is also from New Orleans, and as many of us know, we don't, you know, because of the ma'afa, the slavery, the trauma that we endured, we want to make sure that we're not, you know, hooking up with a cousin.
Right.
Okay? So we have to know the history and know the stories. And for many of us, we don't tell the stories. And so what I do want to say very briefly is that if you are in this room and you don't know the stories of your people at least 4 or 5 generations back, those people are still around you. Some of them are still alive. Get those stories. It is important for you, for your children. And I'll give you an example. There's a sister in this room who knows I love going over her house and hanging out with her great aunts and her great grandmother. And they used to tell the story, but this is back from like in the Shreveport area, Louisiana. Say, remember that time Grandmama took the sheriff's gun and told him when he was acting right, he could come by the house and get it? These is facts, y'all. And so all of us got stories like this, and I sat there and I was like, what? You know, and I'm not going to, and I'm saying that because the sister can be anonymous, but you know, and all of us have these stories in our family.
All it out. All it out.
And that tells you right there, and again, you're proud of your family and your stories. You know, so just so you understand, when you know your stories, when you know who you are, this is where it comes in. Because many of us run around here, we don't know who we are, we just some name. Now, I know where I come from. And when you see me, you don't see me alone. You recognize, oh, that's that bird song boy. I remember, I know his people. I remember them. So when you go somewhere, you know you got to act right because everybody that see you know you. And we want to recreate that space. Because when I grew up here, we're talking about ancestors. I tell people I grew up in the deep south of Los Angeles. Okay. Some of y'all laughing, you understand what I'm saying, but everywhere I went, I was going to run into somebody that knew who I was. And I don't mean that like bragging, like, that's Reverend Birdsong's grandson. You know, we would be acting out on campus, being loud and boisterous. And an elder sister would come, and she wouldn't say nothing, they would just look. And later that week, I got a phone call. Were you
I kept acting out.
on campus behaving? It's like, Oh, that was sister from the choir. Okay, so that's not what happened. Yes, we were loud, but and so because we answer to somebody, and many of us have forgotten what that feels like. You are with somebody, and some people are with you. And that's what we really want to convey as you see it, but also as you leave, as you live. This is our village, and we have the opportunity to make it so. Not just for our children, but for us too. A safe, healthy, holistic, loving space. Wakanda forever.
Hey!